This is the Andy Social Podcast, episode 199.9999999999999999999. You get the picture. This is a bit of a prequel to episode 200, but I thought it would also be a good idea to give you guys a bit of a taste of where Andy Social 2020 is going to go. Sounds like a bit of a political campaign, but I figured... given it's been a few months in between episodes, the last episode, 199, came out in September last year, I'm pretty sure, and we're in February 2020 now. So instead of just getting it started again, I figured I'd change a few things around, keep it fresh, keep it interesting, at least for myself. I mean, you guys will certainly be the judge of that. Time will tell. But one of the things I did, as you guys would have already seen, is I have brand new artwork for the podcast. So thank you to Tristan Tait. So that's tristantait.net. He has been doing some artwork for me recently. I'll get into that a little bit later. But he's done an incredible job of the updated artwork for Andy Social. The original artwork, or now I would like to call it the classic Andy Social artwork, has certainly had its run and done a really good job for me. So thank you for Zach Smith-Cameron, who's been on the podcast previously. He did that artwork and certainly helped me get a little bit of branding out there, aka Gary V. So that's been really good for me. But it was time. We're in a brand new year. It's been a bit of a gap between episodes, so I figured I'd do a little bit of a relaunch, a bit of a new look, make it nice and fresh and interesting. So massive thank you to Tristan for getting some pretty impressive artwork out there. I didn't think he would be able to do what he did. I kind of gave him a really loose concept and, well, I didn't really have to revise anything. He just did it and I went, well, that's pretty damn good. It's better than what I even had in my head. So awesome. And that hasn't been the first time he's done that. Exceeded expectations. So really, really good job that he's done there. The other thing that I'm doing, and this episode is, as I said earlier, a bit of a taste of what's to come. I'm going to up the ante. I'm going to double the amount of episodes per week. So I'm going from 1 to 2. How's that for mathematics? So every Tuesday morning I haven't picked a time, but I guess it's going to be 6 a.m. 6 a.m. probably works for me, I guess. 6 a.m. I'm going to launch a podcast, Andy Social podcast, and it's going to be called Crazy Talk. And it's more or less just going to be me waffling on. So I'm recording this on the Sunday before this episode releases. I wanted to record this right sort of at the last minute, so to speak, before I relaunch the podcast, just to try and keep things relevant, keep it up to date and fairly fresh. And I'm going to ensure that I record every Sunday evening and have that ready for you guys Tuesday morning. So TY will just do a little bit of cleaning up, make sure I don't sound too bad. And Tuesday mornings at 6 a.m. I'm going to release that. Now, in most cases, it's just going to be me waffling on. I'll talk about what's been happening over the past week, what's happening the week to come. If there's anything, I don't know, anything that's going on in my head, I might just ramble on and carry on about something. Maybe I'll get a bit ranty. And because they're Sunday evenings, maybe I've had a few tinnies and I might get a little bit wild. But I also thought it might be a really good idea for me to have this additional episode where I can invite some mates over. I've got all these mates who I could easily have on the podcast as a standalone guest, but it'd be really cool to have people just coming in regularly, popping in and having a chat and talking shit, and maybe we can have a few drinks and get a bit loose or whatever it is, and make this Crazy Talk episode a little bit free for all, as I said, loose, and just see where it goes with not a great deal of format, just me crapping on. I'm going to try not to edit these episodes, so you'll hear me stuttering and umming and ahhing and burping and farting and whatever else is going to happen. I don't know. So if you're not a fan of me or my waffling or whatever, then just stick to the main episode. So I'm going to have Crazy Talk that comes out every Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. And the second episode each week will come out Thursday nights at 8 p.m., which is basically the existing Andy Social podcast episode, the main one, the spotlight, the weekly guest, what I've been doing for the past 5 years, I guess, or 4.5 years. So nothing will change with regards to that. The only thing that's going to change with the guest episodes on Thursday nights is I'm going to try. Now, I'm emphasizing the word try. I'm going to try to reduce the amount of waffling from yours truly in those episodes. So not a lot of plugging, not a lot of little, not that I really had segments or anything like that. I guess I kind of did, but just going to reduce everything. I'm not going to do a lot of updates and things like that. I'm just going to do some very basic plugs and just dive straight into the guest episode and highlight that person. So I know that I think one thing that I've noticed over the years of doing the podcast is that I've got a mixture of people that really enjoy all the ramblings and bullshit that comes from my end, but there's also people that sort of fly in, fly out, so to speak, and listen to just that particular guest and may fast forward through me or get frustrated with me crapping on for too long and just want to get to the guts of the podcast, which is the guest themselves. So I thought, let's try to balance this out a little bit more. I'll still waffle a little bit. Here, I'm already backpedaling. I'll still waffle a little bit in the main episode just so people that are new to the podcast and discover the podcast through the guest episode will get to know me a little bit. But more or less, I'm going to try and dump it all into the Crazy Talk episodes that come out every Tuesday morning. That'll be good for me because I can just get some shit out of my head. It might be good for you guys. Well, I guess it'll be good for you guys who don't want to listen to me ramble on. But if you guys enjoy just train wrecks, me potentially saying things that are going to get me in trouble or whatever it might be, then you guys can tune into the Crazy Talk episodes. Now, Crazy Talk is not a new thing. For people that have been following me and listening to the podcast for quite a few years, I used to do a Crazy Talk YouTube podcast, not a video one, just audio. And I did 100 episodes, which are on YouTube. They're on my Andy Dowling YouTube channel. And when I was living down the coast, one of the things that sort of got me through initially, because I was doing a lot of driving up to Sydney and back each day. So for anyone that's not aware of sort of the locations, I was living down the south coast about 2 to 2.5 hours drive from Sydney itself, and factoring in traffic and things like that. So it's a hell of a lot of driving, about 4 to 5 hours of driving a day. And just to get me through, I was just trying a whole bunch of different things, listen to audiobooks, listen to podcasts. I had to-do lists in my head. I was working out game plans for the day, how to be productive and all this shit. But I also had the idea of recording just a rambling podcast every morning on my way to work. So there's 100 episodes called Crazy Talk, and it's just me waffling on, carrying on, talking about whatever's in my head, things that I might have learnt or whatever. I can't even recall half of them. I think there's a lot of rubbish in there, probably a lot of stuff that even just a couple of years later down the track, well, actually it's probably more than a couple of years, probably 4 years ago, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, 3 or 4 years ago, probably even listening back now, I'd probably cringe, but that's just the name of the game. I cringe at what I did yesterday, let alone 3 or 4 years ago. And if anyone's got Facebook memories, when you turn Facebook on, and it gives you like your most, like a memory from that day over, the past however many years. If you click on, if that memory post is not bad enough and you click in and have a look at everything else that happened on that day over the past however many years you've been on Facebook, it's horrific. It's horrible. There's some disgusting stuff in there. There's stuff that I just quickly get in there and delete where I can, or just roll my eyes and go, oh, like, where was my head at? So, I guess we just continue on in that theme, and I'll just keep incriminating myself and just doing a lot of embarrassing stuff that in the future me will just absolutely hate. But, you got to put yourself out there. So anyway, Crazy Talk has existed. Some people enjoyed it. There wasn't very many people that tuned in. You can see the view count or the play count. There's only like a handful of listens per episode, but it was really good for me. Got shit out of my head, and I figured I may as well kick back into that because I think it'll help me get better at getting things out of my head. A little bit less cloudiness, floating around in my noggin, and it might also help me just get a bit better again at talking. People might laugh at that considering how much I talk, but especially when it comes to catching up with people, doing an actual podcast in person or over Skype or over the phone or whatever it might be with guests. So the Thursday night episodes, I'll just get better at that because I'm just talking more. So that's the theory anyway. So we'll see how we go. I'm going to try and just add heaps of things. As I said before, I'll get some mates over. We'll do some silly podcast episodes, and we'll just see where it runs. So doubling the amount of content or the amount of episodes for the year. So we'll see how long this lasts, but I'm quietly confident, and I've got it all sort of mapped out in front of me. So I'm looking forward to a big year. One of the other things I'm going to do, and I haven't quite worked it out yet, this all comes down to money at the moment, but I am sitting in my apartment here in Piedmont, and I have this cool kind of cool little setup I've got here. I've got a couple of desks, connected to each other, and I've got another seat on the other side, and it's almost very close to a mini studio setup. So I've got a few of the mic cranes. Is that the right word for it? Those boom mics, sort of, not boom mics. Anyway, whatever, those desk crane sort of mic stands or whatever. So I've got a bunch of them. I've actually got 4 of them, and I'm in the process of upgrading. Well, not upgrading, but adding some additional mics. I'm going to buy some more mics. I've got to get a sound card. I've just sold the old sound card. I've got to get a new one. I've got to update my laptop, and I'm also going to do video at some stage down the track as well. So why not, hey? May as well just get a few extra things going here. Because I live in Piedmont, I'm right in the middle of the city now. I'm not living down the coast anymore. I've been spending a lot of time thinking about what I want to do and really taking advantage of the location that I'm in. I tried looking at some locations in the city to base myself, studio spaces or other spaces around that I could set up a makeshift studio and have a permanent sort of destination for people to come in and say hello. But maybe a little bit premature at the moment, mainly because of budget, because I've got no money. So in the meantime, I'm setting up a home one, and where I live in Piedmont, it's just pretty much smack bang in the middle of Sydney anyway. So it's very, very easy for people to get to. I've already had one Andy Social guest for 2020 come here and do a podcast with me, and I'll talk about some of the podcast guests that are coming up very shortly. But it's an easy location, so I'm going to really try to do the most that I can with what I've got here. So I've been spending the last few months trying to, I guess, brainstorm about what I'm going to do, what it's going to look like, and writing out this mammoth list of all the things that I've got to buy and work out. So if you're feeling generous, you can go to paypal.me/Andy Dowling, or you can go to the andysocial.net page and click on the Shout Me a Beer button. And I think you can also click in the show notes. I was doing some templates today for show notes for these Crazy Talk episodes, because there's not really going to be anything new added into the show notes, more or less like a copy and paste sort of deal, unless I think of something unique to talk about. But you should be able to click in the show notes and in your podcast player, and there'll be like a little Shout Me a Beer button or donate button or something like that there. So if you're feeling generous and you want to sling me a dollar or a couple of dollars or a couple of cents or whatever it might be, that'll be huge. The running joke that I've had for the past several years is that the more money that I get from people shouting me a beer means the less of my own money I'm spending on beer, which means I've got more of my own money to spend on podcasting. It's a very roundabout way of supporting the podcast and my ever increasing intake of alcohol. So it's been fun being back in Sydney, I tell you what. So there's a lot of things on the go, a lot of plans to sort of continue to increase the podcast in quality and content, and just doing more and more and more, and really sort of churning out a lot of stuff this year. So some of it was time to begin with, but now I've done a lot of sort of readjusting and shifting around. I've got more time up my sleeve now. So now it's a case of, all right, I've got to get the dollars going. So we'll see how that all goes over the coming months. What else have I got here? I've got a bunch of notes that I've written down. Just, I guess, a bit of a recap over the past few months. So for anybody that probably hasn't been playing along for a while, as mentioned earlier, I was living down the coast with my wife, Jess, and we've decided to move back up to Sydney. We're now in Sydney, living in Piedmont, and renting our home down the coast out, which is very, very good. I like the idea of other people paying to live in something we own. It's crazy concept. But over the past several months of living in Sydney, it's just been a lot of readjusting, different routines. I miss that drive. I miss that drive up to Sydney, because suddenly I have saved a lot of time. I've got a lot more time up my sleeve, but I'm also, I think I took the foot off the pedal a little bit, where I wasn't making the time count because I had too much extra time up my sleeve. So things became a little bit more unfocused and a bit more distracted. And so it took a while to, I guess, get a bit of my mojo back and get a bit more of a routine happening in this new environment with so much temptation and fun and people, and just trying to work out, okay, well, what's life look like now. So there's been a lot of adjusting along the way, but I've still managed to get a bunch of stuff done. One of the main things that I did for anybody that's been sort of following what I've been up to is I did another podcast that came out in November and December of last year called Nod to the Old School. And it was a 10-part podcast series, artwork also done by Tristan Tait, by the way. Really, really good artwork. And it was a 10-part podcast series, which basically was a promotional tool for the latest Lorde album, Fallen Idols. So that album came out on the 1st of August last year. And in November, December, I decided to keep the promo, the campaign going for the album and do this podcast series. And so the whole context, or I guess premise behind the podcast was our album, Fallen Idols, we think, or I guess the theme behind it is an old school metal mixtape. And Tim had the story when he was growing up, and you can hear it on actually, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, I think Tim talks about it in the episode he did on Andy Social, but I think he also talks about, well, he definitely talks about it in Nod to the Old School. But when he was growing up, he used to go to backyard parties and they'd have like a boombox or whatever with some tapes, and they would have these mixtapes of just anything that was guitar driven music, like heavy music. And it could be anything from Bon Jovi to Bathory to Creator to Slayer to Dokken to Queensryche, and everything in between. But it was just all metal for them because, it was everyone bringing their taste together. It was all sort of heavy music in a way. It was all sort of heavy guitars. And there wasn't a lot of that elitism as such, and not as much of a niche sort of subgenre world that we live in now, where there's so many different, especially metal. I mean, how many different subgenres of metal are there? I don't even know what they all are these days. But we sort of wanted to recapture that vibe where when we all first started getting into heavy music, we just had this electricity, this energy, this feeling of just complete wonder and excitement of like, what is this? What's this sound? What's this music? What's like, what are we listening to? What's going through our ears at the moment? And just capturing like that feeling again. And so we went and put together this album that was just what we loved about heavy music. So Fallen Idols, the album, has everything from your stock standard power metal sort of stuff to traditional heavy metal to AOR. So there's a big power ballad in there, very sort of, it's got a bit of Dokken in it and some sort of very AOR sort of sounds. There's also some sort of really sort of thrashy stuff in there, some creative vibes, some melodic death stuff in there, and a whole bunch of different stuff. And it's got sort of Mark's trademark, very funny, sort of Symphony X style riffs in there as well, a lot of chuggy stuff, as well as just sort of that classic dungeon sound as well. And it's just all mixed in, but we've got this formula now where it just sounds like Lorde. So we've made it sort of sound cohesive and flows well, and well, 6 odd months later, people have been saying it's probably the best album that we've released. So proof's in the pudding from the listeners. So thank you so much for everybody that has been enjoying it. But so yes, I'm waffling, and that's the point of this episode. What I did was, and I had this idea at the end of 2018 when we were filming the video clip for United, Welcome Back, and I was in the car with Tim, and I had this idea where I thought, it'd be really cool to interview a bunch of people about their mixtapes, and it was sort of a half-cooked idea, and Tim's like, it sounds good, blah, 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 and then I sort of left it because who knows, I was doing a whole bunch of other stuff at the time, but it was always in the back of my head that I had to get to it eventually, and it just festered and festered and festered, and eventually it just got too much where it was non-negotiable. I had to do it. So I got out there and started bulk recording all these episodes. I got 10 episodes, which were reflective of the 10 songs of Fallen Idols, and each guest that I had on the podcast, the band that they're associated with or played with or currently play with, I made sure that their sound or their music was as close to, or there was a close enough link to that particular song on our album, in the hope that if one of their fans decides to listen to that episode with the artist or the band that they like, that they will hear a sample of our song that's closely linked into that guest, and then hopefully we'll go, oh wow, that sounds really cool, and then get into the album, get into us as a result. So a bit of a sneaky way of doing it, but I kind of like the idea of it. I was giving myself a bit of a pat on the back as I was thinking of these ideas were coming in my head. But So I did 10 episodes, 10 guests, and I had everybody from, well, actually, let's see if I can rattle them off really quickly. I had Andy LaRocque from King Diamond. I had Jenny Skullander from Devilskin in New Zealand. I had Daniel DK from Exciter, Diamonds, and Banger TV. I had, who was episode 4? David Ellefson, I think, from Megadeth, yes. Episode 5 was Willie G, who's been on the podcast Antisocial previously, but guitar tech for Slayer, Anthrax, Megadeth, Nevermore, King Diamond, Opeth, etc., etc., etc. Just an absolute legend. Episode, was that 5? Episode 6 was Brittany Slays of Unleash the Archers. Episode 7 was Johnny D of Doro, Brittany Fox, Wasted. Episode 8 was Lord Tim. I had to get Tim on the podcast, kind of, why not? And what did we have then? Episode 9 was Joel Green of Armored Angel, so classic Australian thrash metal band or death thrash band, and also currently of the band Witch Skull. And episode 10 was Paul Murphy of Utopia Records, which in my opinion is probably the most famous metal store in Australia ever. And they've been around since 1978, I believe. And Paul Murphy's been there for a long period of that time. And he's pretty much Mr. Metal when it comes to the genre. And he still works there now. And he was the perfect person to wrap up this podcast series because he had some classic stories about metal, getting into metal, living in the western suburbs of Sydney. And that guy has met pretty much everybody under the sun when it comes to heavy music. So a great way to wrap up that podcast. So I had some really, really cool people on that podcast. And it did really well. I had a lot of people listening to it. Luckily, the majority of the guests shared the episodes around, which is what you want. When a guest doesn't share an episode around, you just go, oh man, come on, please, just one share, or just like it, or love heart it, or do something, or just comment, or I don't know, whatever. But most of them shared it around, which was really, really good. And that helped considerably. And I dare say we got a few new fans out of it. So it was really good. And the best thing about podcasts, as you guys should probably know, or more than likely know, is that they don't really go away. Like they're there. They just sit there. So even though it was only a 10-part series, it's still available and people can listen to it. So if you haven't listened to it, you can go to andydowling.net and you'll be able to see the icon for Nod to the Old School. Or you can just search for Nod to the Old School in your podcast player. You'll be able to find it, or just search for my name. It'll be pretty easy to find. But that was a bigger project than I thought it would be because I obviously had to lock down each of the people. I had to get those episodes recorded and then edited. They were shorter episodes. They're about sort of half hour each, so shorter than the normal anti-social episodes that people got used to. But then I had to sort of work out this, what I thought was this unique formatting with the episode where I had sort of minute samples of each song off our album, little intros, bits of kind of like pre-recorded plugs, and just some other stuff in there just to have some consistency and branding all the way through the podcast series. So some people probably didn't like how shameless the plugs were, and how, I guess, commercial it sounded. It wasn't the most sort of loose, organic sounding podcast out there, but that wasn't the purpose of the podcast. It was basically a promotional tool. The Nod to the Old School is advertising for Lord, and that was the idea behind it. And for me personally, it was a way to, I guess, get more of my branding out there, get better at doing podcasting, just all the little facets and little aspects that are needed to put a podcast together, and especially start a whole new show. And just something that will sit in my portfolio of projects or things that I'm involved with as well. So that took up a lot of my time. So I think by the time Andy Social started to wrap up in September, I think I just finished recording the 10 episodes, but then had to go in and start going through just all the editing, piecing it all together, structuring it, working through the artwork with Tristan. And by the way, not only did Tristan do the artwork for the logo of the podcast show, he also, and this was sort of a bit of a last minute decision, he did artwork for each individual episode. So the 10 episodes he did, I can never say this word correctly, caricature, I think that's it. These characters, these cartoon characters of the guests themselves. So I had this big Dropbox folder where I just dumped heaps and heaps of photos of each of the guests and just said, I'll leave it to you. Creative freedom. See if you can get a cartoon character out of these people, and he just did such a fantastic job. And I'm so happy that I followed through with this idea, because the idea sort of came into my head and I thought about it, and I just immediately dismissed it because I thought, don't have the time, cannot afford this, because, I've got to pay Tristan. And it just, I just don't, the resources, money and time just weren't there. And then the idea just sat there and sort of just stained my mind in a way. It just stayed there and just festered, and it was almost taunting me, basically saying, if you don't do this, this podcast is going to be shit. Like, it's basically these non-negotiables that go in my head all the time. And so it got to the point where I reached out to Tristan, told him the idea of what I wanted to do, worked out a deal with him, and got it done. And the whole thing cost me a fair bit of money, but I'm so happy that I did it the way that I did, because if I had put out the podcast without the individual episode artwork, or didn't do even the podcast logo itself, where it's me sort of sitting cross-legged in front of a boombox with a pencil trying to wind the cassette tape, very old school. Before that, I was gonna get a blank cassette and then write a bunch of shit on the cassette and then take a photo of the cassette, and that was going to be the podcast logo. And I'm so glad I didn't do that. That would have looked rubbish. So I'm just thinking about it now. Like, I haven't really spent much time thinking about this, but I'm so lucky that I pushed myself to get proper artwork done. And if anything, it helped me really sort of understand the value in the visual aspect to what you do. And for me, even though this is audio for the time being, it's very important to draw people in and create a visual somehow. And the podcast artwork's really, really important. So doing Nod to the Old School and working with Tristan, and how easy it is with him, he is just absolutely amazing. Like, just really, really good. Such a professional. And just going through that experience and being so happy, it was almost a no-brainer. I think just towards the end of him finishing up the Nod to the Old School project with me, I was already saying to him, hey, would you be interested in doing antisocial artwork and sort of doing a revision of antisocial? And then I started working with him to get this new artwork up and running. So I don't think this will be the last time I ever use Tristan. I think I'll continue to take advantage of his talents. But I'm just so happy with what he's done in the last few months for me on a visual aspect. It's just helped considerably. So very, very cool. And make sure you go to tristantait.net and check out some of that artwork, because if you think the artwork that he's done for me is good, you should look at his normal stuff that he does. I think, if anything, he took a bit more of a simplistic approach with my artwork versus what he normally does. Like, he's got some super, super, super impressive work, just mind-boggling, sort of illustrative, is that the right word? Anyway, illustrative work. So go and check all that out. What else have I got here? Okay. So a few little things I thought I would do with these Crazy Talk episodes is, I'm not going to do surprises with you guys. I mean, if you want surprises, then I don't know, maybe I'll just say spoiler alert or something like that. But I'm just going to tell you guys who I've got coming up over the weeks ahead, different guests, maybe some pending guests, people I might be catching up with. I figured if anybody's going to be willing to listen to me waffle and carry on for however long, then, the least I could do is just make you guys feel like you're sort of part of this and contributing in a way. Getting ahead of myself. Contributing, yes, absolutely, but also just getting a bit of insight into what's going on behind the scenes, what's coming up for the podcast, and that way it's just something to look forward to as well, instead of just going, well, I don't know who's going to have on this week, let's wait and see. If you like doing that and you don't want to know, then I'll just say spoiler or something like that, or I don't know, I'll probably forget and just blurt it out anyway. So some of the guests, here we go, spoiler. So this Thursday, episode 200 will be with Andrew Farris of In Excess fame. So I caught up with him not too long ago and had a really, really, really cool chat with him. He's got a brand new album coming out in May, the 15th of May. But I'll let that episode do the talking, and all the plugs are in there. But man, I did not expect that to be episode 200. In fact, I had about 4 or 5 other people, and no, not John Farnham. I know some of you are saying, where's John Farnham? I just he is my Moby Dick, but I just do not think that is going to happen. Every once in a while, every few months, I reach out to Glenn Wheatley and I say, Glenn, has John got any availability? I'm happy to come to him, or the next tour, if he's got any amount of time, I'm happy to try and squeeze something in and just make it happen. I'll bend over backwards. I'll spend the money. I'll just whatever it takes. And Glenn's pretty good. He's replied to all of my emails. Well, I think most of them anyway. He's probably getting over me contacting him, but he'll just come back and either he'll say, "I'll check back in at whatever date or whatever it is when there's an upcoming tour." But actually, they all eventuate with a response of John's not doing any interviews. So if anybody knows John Farnham and his reputation, he very rarely does interviews with anybody. If he's going to do an interview, it's usually on mainstream TV, a little spot somewhere on some of the big media outlets, but for anybody else, it never happens. So for me to even have a consideration is the biggest long shot in the world. So I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep trying. Maybe I'll just interview everybody that's ever played with John Farnham throughout his whole career, and then eventually it'll be just too hard, and he'll just eventually go, "Oh, stuff it. All right." Who knows? Anyway, gone off on a tangent. As soon as that John Farnham word comes into my head, or it's just like I get triggered. Anyway, massive fan. But I had a number of other people that I was trying to get on for episode 200, and just didn't happen. Like, people just gave me the runaround. Not so much their fault, but it was just a case of schedules just got thrown out of whack, double booked, or no responses, or it would be me continuously suggesting dates and then them saying no, can't do it, but not giving me an alternative. Can't stand that. Oh, guys, like, if you don't want to do it, just tell me. Or like, if you want to do it, give me something to work with, like even just a preference of a time during the day, or a day during the week, or maybe just even if it's like in 2 months' time or whatever, just give me something to work with. But for some people, it's just been like throwing things out into the universe and not getting much back. So I still had a few ideas for episode 200, but Andrew Farris came along. A massive thank you to Pete Hodgson, who's been previously on the podcast. He hooked me up there and helped out. So thanks, Pete. And had a great chat with him. So that worked out super well. He became episode 200. He even congratulated me on episode 200 when I went out to have a chat with him. And I thought, oh, very good, very good. He's paying attention. And just a really, really fun chat. So that's this week. So if you're listening to this episode on time, it'll be Thursday night, episode 200 with Andrew Farris of Ineccess. Just a very surreal chat, like just sitting there talking to him, and he's just talking about Michael Hutchence and his career in Ineccess, and just telling all these stories. And I'm just sitting there looking at him going, wow, I'm here talking to you. Like, this is weird. This is super cool. So anyway, stay tuned for that. Some other people that I've got coming up, I'm going to try and get some return guests. Some people I really enjoyed talking to in the past, but probably due for a return visit, I should say. So I've got James Norbert Avani. Went out and had a chat to him at his place. I've got, who else I've got? Daniel Towns, the comedian. He's going to be on the podcast. I went out to Adelaide not too long ago, caught up with... who was out there? Mark Davis, who, for any basketball fans, is an NBL legend, played with the Adelaide 36ers for most of his career, originally from the United States, came out in the early 80s, and was one of these guys that I looked up to as a kid, as this little fat white kid growing up in central Queensland, being obsessed with basketball and just wanting to be a basketball player. And Mark Davis was one of these guys that I had trading cards of. I used to go to Brisbane and see Brisbane Bullet games, and Adelaide 36ers would come through town, and I'd see him play. So just that was a really cool one. So I've got him on the podcast. I caught up with Jade Montserrat, Corey Davis, and Mitch Brackman of Freedom of Fear and Decidia fame. So a couple of great Adelaide bands there. So we had a good group chat there. Who else do I have? Lance Laser from Tough Boys. Go and check out Tough Boys on Spotify. Fucking so good. And a bunch of others. I've got heaps. So I won't reveal everybody, but I've got a lot of guests coming up over the coming weeks. In fact, I think I've recorded about 10 episodes in advance. This is Sunday night, but tomorrow morning I'm catching up with Matt Bacon of Dumb and Dumbest podcast fame, and he's a bit of a PR guru in the metal and sort of doom stoner world. So I'm going to have a chat to him. Who else is out there? I've got a couple of other comedians that I'm hoping to get a podcast with. I'm going to try and do a few more comedians. I think the ones I've done in the past were good, but they're always awkward. I feel like I'm just so not funny around these people, and I think I overthink that. So I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to try and do a few more comedians because, well, they're fun to talk to. So I'm going to have them on. Who else? I'm going to do a lot more basketball people. I've got a few little foots in the door with a few different people to potentially get some great basketball players. I actually try to get Muggsy Bogues. He's one of my 200 candidates for any NBA fans. He was the shortest ever player in the NBA in the 90s. He was 5'3", Tyrone Muggsy Bogues. I did hit him up, but I got an email in response, which was quite good, but it was from, I don't know, like his PR person or whatever, just saying that he didn't have time to do it, or no schedule for it, but then offered to participate in his weekly Insta Live things where people get a chance to ask him one question. And I just thought that sounds really lame and shit. So I just left it go, which was a shame because having Muggsy Bogues on the podcast would have been ridiculous. However, if you guys know a lot of 80s and 90s NBA basketball, I'm going to try and hit some of those people up from years gone by, some nostalgic throwbacks along the way. But I want to really get involved with what's happening now, some current players as well. So that involves a bit of research and a little bit more networking along the way. But I really I love basketball. I grew up with it, and it's something that this podcast, the foundation was in music, but I really want to embrace absolutely everything that I love. I love in life. It sounds lame. So whether that be basketball or music or, these great authors, these books that I'm reading, whether it be, self-development stuff or some science-based stuff or whatever it is. I mean, you guys have seen some of the podcast guests I've had over the years. So I'm definitely going to continue on in that vein and have like a really sort of odd mix or eclectic mix of guests on the podcast. But lots of cool stuff to come. A lot of stuff where I'm no doubt going to be pushing myself out of my comfort zone as usual. I think I feel like I do that every time I do a podcast anyway, so that will just be a running theme moving forward. What else? I think that's probably it for the time being. I'm just trying to look through some notes here. I'm going to start writing shit down because I'm going to start forgetting. I just put a message on Facebook to say for Mark Furtner to do a video of you guys know the Metallica song The Struggle Within. If anyone who has ever watched the 1.5 years in the life of Metallica videos, I think it's the first one, because I think the first one, part one, is when they're in the studio recording the Black Album, and part two is when they go on tour. It's like is it called Wherever I May Roam tour, I think? Anyway, it was like a 3-year, 4-year tour or something like that. Like epic. Both videos are just amazing. Like, these were the videos that for many of us around sort of my age, sort of mid-30s to sort of early 40s, this was sort of like what got a lot of us into music or wanted to like influence us to be musicians in the first place. Anyway, in part one, when they're in the studio, Kirk Hammett is recording the solo for The Struggle Within, and it is shit hot. It is so good. I mean, I love that solo. The song just rips. It's just so good. I love that song. And I've told Mark ages and ages ago, when he started doing a few little guitar videos here and there, I said, can you do some Metallica ones? Like, do some Metallica solos, because they're good for hits. They're going to show up in search results. People love it. They can instantly identify with it. They're popular songs, and just, little 30-second solos. And for him, like, he's a massive Metallica fan. I mean, these solos are just pull it out of his ass in a couple of minutes and he'll be able to smash it. And so I've been on his back about it for ages. But anyway, just before I press record on this podcast, I put a post up on my Facebook page just saying, hey, Mark, get your Kirk Hammett guitar out and record the solo and make it happen. So if you're on my Facebook page, please go and abuse the hell out of him, put a lot of pressure on him. I don't know whether that'll work because he's a bit stubborn, but I need to show that the market is requesting this. So if he does it, I will put it in the show notes in a future Crazy Talk episode. But I really want him to do this video big time. What else is going on? I think, one more thing. I know there's a couple of you guys that have been pestering me about my mailing list. I was crapping on about it in the last several episodes of Andy Social, saying, yeah, it's coming. Anyway, it's going to be coming this Thursday night. I'm going to schedule it for around the same time as episode 200 coming out. And it will be a monthly mailing list, sort of e-newsletter that'll go out. I need your input. So if you do get a copy of this email, I've got a few of your email addresses. Don't ask me how. Naughty. But if you get it, if you're not interested, just unsubscribe. Don't select one of those buttons saying that you never asked for this, or I don't know this guy, or this guy's a piece of shit, or whatever. Just unsubscribe and just say I no longer want to receive this email. Just do that, please. Like, don't make it difficult for me. But I need your input. What I want to do is every month I want to put this out, talk about the month that was, sort of recap on some of the episodes, just in case people haven't had time to catch up, or maybe they've missed a post on social media, or they're not subscribed to one of the sort of podcast feeds. And be able to see what's been happening in Andy Social Land, but also I want to start doing giveaways. Every once in a while I get some free stuff, so why not share it around with some good people? I'm going to have all the links to all the shit that I sell online through Discogs and eBay, etc. Band stuff. I'm going to have some discount codes, and then as the podcast continues to grow and get momentum again, I'm hoping I'll be able to get some affiliate stuff and just different things, but I basically want to make it interesting and of some value to you guys. So please let me know any ideas that you have, anything to make it interactive. I want to get to a point with Andy Social where it's a real sort of group effort, where I've got this community of people where it's not really about me as such. It's about me. My name's in the freaking podcast title, egomaniac right here. But not so much just about me, but you guys contribute to this. So maybe these Crazy Talk episodes are sort of running through stuff that you guys send me, or some responses to things, feedback, or whatever it is, but also some contributions and things for these newsletters that are going out. So as of Thursday this week, when it gets sent out, I should have there's about 1,500 people on my mailing list. So there's been, so if you've ever like received an email from me over the years, like whether it was 15 years ago or like, in the last week, sorry, but you're going to get an email from me on Thursday night. So there you go. But it's going to be, hopefully it continues to be a big mailing list and continue to expand and get bigger and better. So I want to use it for good, whether it be highlighting good stuff that you guys are doing, or anything interesting, or finding opportunities to, give shit away or offer good deals or whatever it might be. So the world is our oyster. We'll work it out as we go. So lots of stuff happening. But a quick recap before I wrap all this up. Everything's in the show notes as far as the usual links to everything that I'm involved with, whether it be these podcasts, the Andy Social, the previous episodes, Nod to the Old School. Self-starter. Oh, fuck, I forgot to mention. Self-starter ended in probably September as well. September is probably where I just had this mental breakdown when I can't do it anymore. Self-starter season 2 finished in September, and it is finished more or less for the time being. I guess in a way have put it on ice. I haven't completely given up on it just yet. I may come back to it, but at this point in time, it is nowhere near in my list of priorities in life. So fantastic experience, another thing from my portfolio, and connected with and got so much out of that, everything from accolades to building my network, and there's so many sort of indirect things that came off the back of Self-starter that just are ridiculous. So it's been a massive advantage for me to work on that, and and it still exists. So you can go to selfstarter.com.au and check out the 2 seasons. I think there's about 40 episodes, I think, in total there. So there's plenty of content there, lots of stuff. There is a blog on there as well where I was trying to do blog posts for every single takeaway from every single episode. Didn't quite get there. Part of me still wants to finish that all off, but that could take me 12 months to do. So we'll see what happens. But that's still all there, and you can find Self-Starter in your podcast player as well. But for anyone that's not familiar, that was all about oh God, I should know this off by heart. Small business, self-employment, and freelancing. It's been a while. So if you're self-employed or you got your own business or you want to do something like that down the track, check out Self-Starter, and that will just always exist. So it's a nice little thing to go back. It's kind of evergreen content in a way for any of you marketing gurus out there. So it means that probably in the next 5 to 10 years, most of that stuff will still be relevant and useful. So it's a very good resource and tool for people that are interested or already involved in that whole self-employment domain. But I cut the ties off that one, let that one sort of go, and that's still accessible over at andydowling.net. So if you want to check out, and yes, that's some sirens in the background, I don't know if you can hear that. So you go to andydowling.net, all the podcasts are there, Self-Starter, Not to the Old School, and this one, Andy Social. Links to Lord are there, all my social media handles, and I will also have, or back into the show notes itself, I'll have the donation links for paypal.me. I'll have, the links to Discogs and eBay. So if you're a music collector, I've got like 1,500 odd things on Discogs, everything from vinyl to CDs to cassettes to DVDs, all music, metal, punk, rock, blues, jazz, and whatever else I can't think of at this point in time. There's heaps and heaps of stuff there. eBay's got music on there as well as books. It's got some apparel, and it's got some odds and ends, unwanted gifts from over the years, a lot of decluttering via eBay. So the links are always going to be in the show notes for these Crazy Talk episodes. So if you want to find something or want a bit of a sticky beak, you can click on those links and check it out. And please, I mentioned this in the previous Andy Social episodes, you can use the... what the fuck am I talking about? You can, a total train of thought then, I just looked across, anyway, whatever, I'm getting distracted. This is where this podcast is going, Andy Social 2020. Just mention you heard me on the Andy Social podcast when you buy something off me from Discogs or eBay, and I will add some extra shit into the order for you. So just a little bit of an extra value add, and it'd be nice just to, I've had a few people do that in the past, which has been really good. And it's just nice to see that people are listening to me waffle on, and I know it's getting long in the tooth now. And it's obviously connecting to me selling shit as well. So that's a massive help. And so, yeah, feel free to mention Andy Social when you order something, and I'll include some extra stuff in there. And also a good thing to note is that everything that I sell via those, especially those 2 places in particular, but also I guess the Andy Social store on Bandcamp, all that money that comes from that more or less just goes back into the podcast. It has funded so much stuff. It's funded, getting around to do podcast interviews. It covers the editing. It covers, the website. What else does it do? The gear, updating stuff. And soon it will also be contributing to buying additional microphones, getting the sound card, upgrading my laptop, getting some cameras, and getting some other people on board to make this bigger and better as it grows, etc., etc. So, if you buy a CD or something like that, you're getting a CD, but you're also contributing to this little fun project that I'm involved with. So feel good about that. That's about it. I don't know what else is going to talk about. I'm probably going to press stop and then fucking just go, shit, I forgot 50 million things, but I think I've fucking crapped on more than enough. What are we at? 48 minutes. Oh my God, I was going to try and make this 30 minutes. Anyway, who cares? This is Crazy Talk. I'll say whatever the hell I want in these episodes. If you don't like it, go and listen Thursday nights. Episode 200 is going to be out this week. We made it. Finally, months and months of doing nothing. From what it seems, I am back and ready to go. So thank you so much, and we will chat soon. Ta-ta. Larry.